What I love about the old boats that are left to us from before World War II is that every one is different. They started out differently because they were all built for individual people, for individual jobs. And as time has left its mark upon them, they've diverged and become even more different. So they're real individuals. They're a bit like us really when we get older. Now then, what we have here is Golden Vanity. She was built in 1908 in a yard at Gampton, round the corner from Brixham. The yard was noted for building Brixham trawlers, and they built this boat for Arthur Briscoe, who was one of the greatest marine artists of the 20th century. He had the boat built there because he wanted a big, stable boat, and he had her built along fishing boat lines and to fishing boat specification because he knew that would make a steady vessel. He was more interested in her being steady than in her being fast. And so that's what he got. Now this boat is actually of the type known as a mumblebee, and the reason they were called that is quite simple. The big Brixham trawlers went all over the place fishing, but these particular boats, which are smaller than the big ones, she's about 40 feet on deck, they used to go round very often into the Bristol Channel and would fish off Swansea. The headland there is called the Mumbles, hence the fact that they were called mumblebees. So that's the boat we have. She's a classic gaff cutter. At the moment her bowsprit's run in, and we're going to run it out in a short while. It'll be fun watching that go on. The people who are responsible for getting this boat back on the water in the really fine state that she's in are First Class Sailing, which is run by Charlie Tullow, who's with us today, and they're going to run her partly as a charter boat and partly as a training vessel. The refit, which has been so well done, happened at the Elephant Boatyard at Bursledon, where Charlie organised a volunteer army to come along and help out. The Elephant Boatyard looked after my boats for 30 years and more, and they're the best there are. They're lovely. They really understand boats like this. Interestingly, they're also building an absolutely modern, up-to-the-minute boat that I'm involved with at the moment, a 50-foot cruising yacht in wood epoxy to a design by Nigel Irons. So that's a yard, isn't it? The rig has been put together again from scratch. And I often find when I go on boats where that's happened that it's a bit of a dog's dinner, quite honestly, but that has not happened here. On the whole, the rig works really well. There are a few minor adjustments that we're still making, and it's rather fun seeing those going on, but essentially it works brilliantly. These days, the guys who run docks charge you for your overall length, including the bowsprit. What's that all about? You can't live in a bowsprit, can you? You can only live in the bit that's the actual boat, but they charge you for it anyway. In the old days, they used to run them in quite simply to make more room in harbour because the boats were crammed in like sardines in a tin. So there we are. The critical thing when this goes out is to make sure that there's nothing stopping it, because it's not difficult, it's all balanced really, and it goes out quite sweetly. But if any of these ropes snags, it won't go, and then you've got all sorts of problems. So preparation is everything. Yeah, Louisa the mate's doing a great job. That was the whisker shroud came out. It's called a whisker because if it's got spreaders, which actually this one doesn't have, but very often they do, and the spreaders stick out from the bow of the boat like a cat's whiskers, and that's why it's called a whisker shroud. When the bowsprit's right out, it's secured in the bits. The bits are the two posts sticking up on the foredeck there. It's secured in there by a heavy iron pin called a fid, and that'll be dropped in the back and that'll hold it in place. And once it's out and fitted, then they'll sort out all this gubbins, all these bits of string, all of which have a function.
I don't think it's necessary, but fine, okay.
All right. Quickly plaster this.
Absolutely brilliant to feel her actually sailing, and it's lovely to feel her come to life. She's just like a different girl now. We've pumped some beef up into that jib halyard, which was sagging away horribly because there isn't really enough purchase on the halyard itself, but we put a handy billy on it, whacked it down with the strongest man on board, and that's done it. The jib luff's standing up pretty well now. Everything else is drawing well, and she's just thumping along. It's absolutely lovely. The sea's sparkling, we've got force 4 to 5 wind, and she's heeling sweetly. The helm is light as a feather. I'm really impressed by that, and you know, that's probably because nobody designed her. She was built on the beach by men who knew what they were doing and had learnt from their fathers who'd learnt from their fathers. And there's a lot to be said for that, you know. Very often, the wisdom of vernacular man outstrips science. And certainly, right now, with this breeze, it's absolutely true with this boat.
I was aware she'd come up for sale. I'd sailed on her 20 years or so ago, and kind of boats like this do get under your skin. And the opportunity came up to buy her, and I thought, let's see where we go with it. She was in a bit of a state, certainly cosmetically, needed a lot of TLC, and it was just really nice to kind of restore her and get her going again, with the idea of getting as many people as possible out sailing on a gaffer. You know, we got her out of the water, we stripped all the paint off her, and there were years of paint. All the varnish came off, there was some caulking to do, sealing up the seams. She leaked like a sieve on the deck. There wasn't a lot of structural stuff. There was certainly one rotten frame.
Only one?
Yeah, only one that we found.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure you'd have found them all because they're sharp.
Yeah, well, we went through the
Elephant.
lot. We went through the most of them. The shoe, that was in quite a state. Bit of welding in areas to patch it up, but shot blasted back and painted with a zinger, kind of zinc paint.
Yeah. I'm amazed that you didn't have more structural issues. I mean, she was obviously very well built in the first place.
Yeah. The odd bit of wood was chopped out and replaced, but nothing.
Well, of course.
Nothing massive.
Yeah, it's all. Well, that just goes on, doesn't it? Because she's an organic thing. So, you know, like the rest of us, things drop off after a while, but we soldier on.
Why is that there?
So it feeds up like this, and then I bring it forward.
I don't think it's
We've got lots of customers who sail our GRP boats, and it's just nice to be able to give our customers another, the opportunity to sail on something like this, which they probably, most people won't get the opportunity to do.
Let go of the down oar, we're killing ourselves.
Hold it on the sheet, ease off on the sheet.
Ease the sheet. All right, I'm easing the sheet. All right, what do you want then? Leader?
I was doing more and more dinghy sailing on the Thames during the years when I was working in London.
Yeah.
And I became an assistant instructor down there.
Yeah.
And I was just really enjoying it and wanted to see if I liked bigger boats. So I came down here and did my comp crew and day skipper with Charlie.
Yeah.
And I just thought, this is amazing.
What were you doing before?
I was working for an orchestra in London.
An orchestra?
Yeah.
So are you musically trained, or was it?
Yeah, I'm a violinist and a singer as well.
Are you really?
Yeah.
And you end up on here?
Yeah.
So what do you see the future?
I'd like to obviously get my yachtmaster, and we're going down to the West Country later this season, so it will be nice to sail in and out of Devon and Cornwall as well.
It's interesting watching people sailing the boat today when we've had a bit of breeze. You feel there's a lot of people, and sometimes you feel you need them all to sail the boat because she is quite hefty. But it doesn't have to be that way on a gaffer. I had a boat this size which was designed by a man called Nigel Irons, who's famous for his multi-hull designs, but he designed me a gaff cutter. And it was a lovely boat, it was a flying machine. And I used to sail her with just my wife, and it was the same size as this, full-on gaff cutter. And we managed okay. And it's because of the gear. If you get the gear set up right, it doesn't have to be that hard work. Now, this actual boat, Golden Vanity, which is a very heavy boat for her size, and so steady and stable, lovely. She was single-handed across the Atlantic by a man called Pete Crowther in the early 70s in the single-handed transatlantic race. And he recognised that the boat doesn't go well to windward by the comparison with modern racing yachts, which he was competing against. So he decided he wouldn't even try. He wouldn't go around the North Atlantic and thrash up there. He went down south and found the trade winds and crossed the Atlantic that way, which is really the rational way to do it if you want a nice time. The only thing was, there was no weather routing in those days, or certainly Pete didn't have any, and he didn't get it quite right, and he ran into a huge area of no wind, and it took him 80 odd days to get across. But he arrived with no serious problems, and his was the slowest time ever recorded for a complete finish in the single-handed transatlantic race. And he succeeded in Golden Vanity, and she's here to tell the tale. And I met Pete Crowther a few years after that with Nigel Irons again, and Nigel said, let's go and have a pint in Dartmouth. And just outside Dartmouth he took me into a pub, and Pete Crowther was the landlord. So I met Pete and we had a pint in his pub and I'd loved yarn about Golden Vanity. And you know, I hadn't seen her again till the other day when I sailed on board, and I had such a good time. And it's a happy thing. Godspeed the Golden Vanity.